Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the back alleys of 1970s Lagos, where the air smells like fried plantains and motor oil, and the nights are just humid enough to feel like a slow-cooked secret. You're about to meet a woman most people wouldn't believe existed, a soft-spoken figure with eyes like blade edges, who built an underground empire where even the police paid her to stay quiet. And yes, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in her world, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. This is a quiet little global club after all. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night air over Lagos is heavy, thick with the scent of diesel, grilled fish, and salt blown inland from the Atlantic. Somewhere along a crowded stretch of Broad Street, a man with too many rings counts something behind a stall covered in stolen transistor radios. To his left, a boy no older than 9 steals 3 coins off the table and disappears into the fog between traffic. Nobody shouts. No one gives chase. The city is too used to losing. And in the middle of all this lives a rumor. She's called different names depending on who you ask. The ghost woman, market widow, the one who paid the general. But to those who truly knew her, she had one name only, Adaobi. And tonight, her story begins. It starts not in a nightclub or crime ring, but beside a pile of salted fish in a forgotten corner of EP Port. She's a barefoot girl, no more than 10, with arms that look too thin to carry the sack of broken tiles she uses to weigh down her mother's tarp. Her eyes, however, are wide and alert, scanning the passing men for signs of danger. She doesn't speak unless someone speaks first. She doesn't cry, not even when her feet are burned raw from the sun-heated stone. Her father had been a fisherman, or so she was told. He went to sea one day and never came back. Her mother sold dried gary and fish guts to the dock workers until cholera found her in the monsoon season. There were no last words, no ceremonies. The market simply shifted to cover the spot where her mother once squatted, and Adaobi slept near the oil drums. A month after the funeral, she learned her first valuable lesson. When you're small and alone, people don't give you money. They give you orders. She began running errands for the stall vendors, carrying water buckets, chasing off rats, and once even delivering a note with nothing but a lipstick kiss on it. She didn't read it. She just watched the man's face change as he opened it, memorizing that expression for reasons she didn't understand yet. There are records, old ones, that say Lagos in 1972 was a city on fire, not literally, but politically. Nigeria was fresh off a civil war, and the people were trying to dance their way out of grief. Military coups were as regular as rainfall. Everyone trusted no one, and those who smiled too much were either drunk, corrupt, or new to town. Adaobi wasn't any of those. She had one advantage: she could go unnoticed for hours. By the time she was 12, she'd mastered the unspoken art of listening with her eyes. She knew the names of men who ran the docks, the ones who ran the girls, and the ones who pretended to run both. She never repeated what she heard, not even to the other kids she slept beside at night. Trust was a luxury. So was talking. One afternoon, while resting under a split bamboo shade near a papa port, Adaobi watched a man get stabbed over a crate of cigarettes. The blade slipped in like it was butter. The man made no sound, only dropped to the ground in slow motion, like someone deflating. The attacker didn't run. He knelt down, wiped the blade clean on the dead man's shirt, then dropped the knife into a passing basket of coconuts. That's when Adaobi understood. Power wasn't just about having a weapon. It was knowing when not to be afraid to use it. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay on her side in the shadow of an abandoned bus, watching the way the headlights of passing cars painted slow-moving shapes across the rusted ceiling. She thought of her mother's hands, always rough, always in motion. She remembered how those hands had never hit her, even when they had nothing to give. In the days that followed, Adaobi changed. She began to walk differently, not fast, not slow, just steady. She stopped smiling at strangers. She made her voice lower, even if it cracked when she tried. And most importantly, she started asking questions. Not out loud, of course, but inside her head. Why did that man die? Who got the crate afterward? What did the girl in the blue dress know? Many people still think that Adaobi was simply born hard, that she didn't feel what others felt. But those who knew her in childhood remember otherwise. They say she once gave away all her food to a crying baby, that she buried a stray dog with her own bare hands after it was run over. So what do you think? Was it the world that made her cold? Or did she just learn faster than the rest? By the age of 13, she had 2 part-time jobs. One as a dish runner for an outdoor buka near Carter Bridge, and another as a runner for a gang that specialized in fake perfume and imported jeans. She didn't get paid in money. She got fed, and sometimes allowed to sleep on dry cloth. That was enough. And then came the job that changed everything. It wasn't a big heist or a bloody hit. It was a misunderstanding. A drunk man at the club mistook her for someone else. He grabbed her arm, slapped her hard enough to spin her face sideways, and laughed as she stood frozen, except she didn't freeze. She picked up the bottle he'd been drinking and cracked it against his face with every ounce of muscle in her back. Glass went flying. Blood followed. The club music stopped. Everyone stared. The man collapsed, groaning. No one moved. Except one. A woman in a scarlet dress stood from the shadows, heels clicking against tile like gunfire. She looked at Adaobi for a long time, then turned to the bouncer. "She's mine," the woman said. "Get her cleaned up." And just like that, Adaobi entered the underworld. Not through a grand entrance, not through choice, but through blood and broken glass, just like so many before her. The woman in the scarlet dress is named Madame Iredi. She is known around the harbor for many things: her money, her mouth, her temper, but mostly for the way she moves. Graceful, precise, almost surgical. Every heel click is deliberate. Every sentence, a quiet threat wrapped in sugar. Adaobi sits across from her now, in the back room of the club, legs swinging above the concrete floor. Her face is still red from the slap, but she doesn't cry. Madame Ireti studies her with a long, measuring glance, like she's buying a second-hand statue and trying to decide where the cracks might be. "You broke his face," Ireti says, voice calm. With one swing, Adaobi stares at the bowl of Fo Riro in front of her, steaming and untouched. She doesn't speak. Ireti leans in slightly. "Do you know who he was?" Adaobi shrugs, just the tiniest motion. "Doesn't matter," Ireti adds, straightening. "He was stupid. That makes him disposable. But you have something more valuable." Adaobi doesn't know what to make of that, but she eats the stew anyway. Slowly, quietly. The taste is strong, pepper and smoke and something like goat. But it's the richest food she's had in weeks. Ireti watches her like a hawk, but not unkindly. There's something else in her gaze, something calculating, protective even. Later that night, Ireti walks Adaobi through the back corridors of the nightclub, pointing out locked doors and men who don't blink. She speaks softly, almost lazily, but every word matters. "You don't owe me anything," she says. "But if you're smart, you'll stay close. This world eats little girls unless they bite back. Adaobi bites. Not physically, those days are mostly behind her, but she learns. Fast. Faster than anyone expects. She watches how the women flirt without promising, how the men make threats wrapped in laughter, how money moves in small stacks, each with a name attached. She notices the bar manager counts cash twice, but only reports the first amount. She sees that Ireti never drinks, never dances, never argues. Power, it seems, is quiet. Her first job under Ireti's protection isn't glamorous. She scrubs floors and polishes the metal on the upstairs banisters. But the work gives her time to listen, to hear names, learn patterns. Which men gamble too much? Which soldiers come armed but leave defenseless? Which girls get too drunk to spot a pickpocket? And which girls are pickpockets themselves? And then there's the back room. A windowless space, lined with shelves, always guarded. Men go in and out at odd hours, but no music comes from inside. No laughter. Only once does Adaobi hear a voice from within. A whisper, deliberate, like someone praying not to be overheard. Many people still think that back room was just a storage closet, but others say that's where the real business happened, the kind that didn't show up on ledgers or in daylight. So what do you think? Was Adaobi just a curious kid with a mop? Or was she already laying bricks for the empire she'd someday build? One Thursday afternoon, the club's errand boy gets picked up by police. He's only 15, but he's carrying a brown paper envelope that disappears before the officers even file their report. Ireti is furious, though you'd never know it from her face. She simply pours herself a glass of water, sips once, and says, "We need someone smarter." That night, Adaobi gets a new job. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a quiet hand on her shoulder and a small envelope. "Take this to Anakin Barracks," Ireti says. "Do not open it. Do not stop walking. If anyone tries to speak to you, pretend you're mute." Adaobi nods. She's not afraid, not exactly, but her heart taps a nervous rhythm as she walks. The envelope feels heavy, like it knows things. Lagos is busy, buzzing, full of music and traffic and half smiles, but Adaobi moves through it like smoke, soft and unnoticed. The man at the barracks entrance has a scar across his lip and eyes that seem to peel you open. Adaobi doesn't blink. She hands him the envelope. He looks at her, then looks at it. Doesn't say a word. Just nods, once, then turns away. Mission complete. She walks home slower, allowing herself to notice the city in layers. Rusted railings, cracked pavement, a goat sleeping beneath a stolen car battery. She wonders what was in the envelope, but not deeply. Curiosity, she's learned, is dangerous when it leads to questions. 2 weeks later, she delivers something heavier, a small package in a cloth wrap. Same rules. No talking. No stopping. This time it's to a hotel with windows that never open. She counts the floors, remembers the bellboy's face. Nothing escapes her notice. Over time, she graduates from errands to logistics. Ireti begins involving her in planning. How long would it take to move 20 crates across town during curfew? She asks one evening. Adaobi does the math in her head, subtracting police checkpoints and adding bribe time. 7 hours, she answers. Maybe 8 if it rains. Ireti smiles. Good. Now plan it anyway. By 16, Adaobi has memorized every shortcut between Lagos Island and Yaba. She knows how to tell which street sellers are real and which ones are lookouts. She knows how to read the tides without a clock and how to fold cash so it looks thicker than it is. But her greatest talent is simpler. She listens. In a world where everyone talks too much, Adaobi says just enough. She keeps secrets better than anyone, even from herself. Then one night the club gets raided. It happens fast. Boots, shouting, flashlights in the dark. Adaobi is in the kitchen, hiding behind a sack of onions. She watches a soldier pistol whip the bar manager. A girl screams, bottles shatter, but Iredi isn't caught. She's gone, vanished before they arrived. No one saw her leave. No one hears from her for days. When she returns, it's through the alley, soaking wet from the rain, wearing a janitor's uniform that's 2 sizes too big. Adaobi asks no questions, but that night, she lies awake and thinks, if she can vanish, so can I. That raid changes everything. The club recovers, but the tension stays. Iredi becomes quieter, stricter. She sends Adaobi out more often, trusts her with more sensitive tasks, names, phone numbers, bribes, and with every new errand, Adaobi grows bolder, more curious. One evening, she follows a delivery past the usual checkpoint. The recipient is a man with 3 rings and a limp. His name is Salako. He speaks English like he studied in Britain, but curses like a dockhand. He sees Adaobi, nods once and says, "You're the shadow I heard about." He pays in foreign bills, crisp, blue, and folded once. Adaobi pockets them, heart racing. Later, back at the club, she asks Iredi, "Who is he?" Iredi sighs, drinks her tea, and says, "He's the reason I sleep with my back to the wall." Salako's name begins to drift into Adaobi's world like a dark tide, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. He's not like the other men. No swagger, no gold chains, no crude jokes in smoky corners. His power isn't worn, it's implied, whispered. His money comes from ports no one talks about and leaves the country in boxes labeled flour. He doesn't own a club, doesn't keep a posse, and doesn't drink. But whenever he walks through the market, people shift. They make room. Even beggars look away. One afternoon, Iredi calls Adaobi into her dressing room. The mirror is lined with light bulbs, but half are out. Iredi is removing her earrings, her fingers slower than usual. "Salako wants to borrow you," she says, voice tight. Adaobi doesn't answer immediately. Not because she's scared, though she is, but because she knows what borrow means. It means exposure. It means being seen by someone who never forgets a face. And it means being useful, or being discarded. Iredi reads her silence. You won't be alone. He just wants a courier he can trust. "Why me?" Adaobi asks. "Because you don't talk," Iredi replies. The next morning, she meets Salako at the edge of the Lagos lagoon. The water is murky, littered with floating trash and the occasional drifting shoe. He's wearing a simple white tunic and sunglasses too dark for morning. No bodyguards, no smiles. "Do you swim?" he asked without greeting. Adaobi nods once. "Do you lie?" he asks again. She shakes her head. He watches her for a moment, then hands her a small box wrapped in banana leaf. "Take this to the woman with the rooster tattoo. You'll find her at the 3rd fish stall in Balagan Market. Don't look inside." Adaobi's heart taps faster, not from fear, but from something else, something sharper. Purpose. She tucks the package into her sash and moves quickly, threading through alleys and roadside fruit sellers, past Danfo's honking for space. Balogan Market is alive, always, smelling of palm oil and dried pepper, the air thick with arguments and bargain cries. The woman with the rooster tattoo doesn't speak. She just nods when Adaobi approaches, takes the box, slips something into Adaobi's hand, and vanishes behind a curtain of hanging meat. Adaobi doesn't look at what she received until she's back in the club. It's not money, it's a charm. A tiny leather pouch tied with red thread, still warm from the woman's palm. She shows it to Areti, who frowns. "Keep it," she says. "You'll need it." That night, Adaobi has the first nightmare she can remember since childhood, of drowning in clean water. No trash, just silence and hands pulling her down. She wakes before dawn and walks the club floor barefoot. The tiles are cold. The place is quiet. She feels something shifting, not outside, but inside her, like a stone rearranged. From that job onward, Salako uses her more often. Each mission different. Once, she delivers 3 peeled oranges. No message, no name. Another time, a broken wristwatch. But every object matters. Each one is a signal, a move on a board she's beginning to understand. One day, she asks Areti what Salako does. "Imports," Areti says with a dry chuckle, "and exports." But Adaobi knows better. He exports silence, imports fear. Many people still think Salako was just a middleman, someone who paid others to do the dirty work. But others claim he ran a smuggling ring that touched every major city in West Africa. So what do you think? Was he just another player? Or the one pulling the strings all along? Adobe's role begins to evolve. She stops scrubbing floors, starts organizing meetings. She gets her own key to the back room. One night, Salako invites her to dinner. It's in a small, unmarked restaurant with no signs, just a curtain over the door. Inside, it's quiet. No music. Just the sound of chewing and whispered orders. He pours her water himself, then gestures to the menu. "Pick something expensive," he says. She doesn't. She picks beans. He smiles. "You're different," he says, "but you won't be for long." The meal is quiet, but the message is loud. She's being watched, groomed. He sees her potential, and he's planning where to place her. As they leave, he gives her a folder. Inside, maps, names, a list of customs officers with handwritten notes in the margin. Some have stars beside them. Others are crossed out. Adobe doesn't ask questions. She studies the names that night by candlelight. One name she recognizes, a man who once slapped Areti in public. Another is a neighbor who always seemed too kind for his job. She memorizes all of them. Weeks pass. The club grows busier. More soldiers, more deals. Adaobi stops being background. She becomes expected. One evening, she catches 2 men whispering about her. One calls her the Silent One. The other says, "She's Ireti's ghost." Neither realize she's listening. That same week, the club is attacked. It's not a raid this time. It's a warning. Someone throws a Molotov cocktail through the back window. Flames catch the curtains, then the shelves. Ireti screams. Men shout. Water buckets fly. Adobe runs, not away, but toward the fire. She grabs Ireti's ledger from the office, pulls it close to her chest, douses it in beer to keep the pages from catching. By the time the flames die, 2 tables are destroyed. The smell of smoke lingers for days, but the books are safe. Ireti doesn't thank her, not with words, but she gives Adobe something better. A knife. Simple, straight, no decoration. "Don't show it unless you plan to use it," she says. Adobe nods, and from that day forward she wears it tucked into her waistband. Not for offense, for certainty. One afternoon, she sits with Ireti and watches a man beg for his life after failing to deliver a shipment. He sweats, stammers, promises everything. Adaobi doesn't flinch, doesn't look away. Later, Areti leans in and whispers, "You're ready." "Ready for what?" Adaobi doesn't ask, but she knows. The girl who once carried sacks of onions now carries secrets bigger than names. The city knows her by shape, by silence, by the way her eyes scan a room before her feet enter it. And somewhere deep inside, she begins to believe what others already say in whispers, that Adaobi is not just learning the game, she's becoming the game. The first time Adaobi kills a man, no one sees her do it. There's no crowd, no flashing lights, no dramatic confrontation. Just a dark alley behind a bakery and the sound of rain bouncing off corrugated tin. The man's name is Omoja. He's a mid-level hustler who thinks he's higher than he is. Part-time loan shark, part-time snitch, full-time liability. Salako sends her, not with instructions, but with a statement. He's overdue. Adaobi knows what that means. She's 17. Omoja doesn't expect her. When he turns and sees her in the alley, he grins. "You lost, little ghost?" He chuckles, stepping closer, umbrella swinging like a metronome. She doesn't answer. She waits for him to move just close enough. Then she stabs. Not wild, not messy, just once. Center mass. Clean. He drops like cloth. A low grunt, then nothing. The rain covers the sound. The darkness swallows the evidence. She walks away with her knife still warm. That night, she doesn't sleep. Not because she feels guilt, but because she feels nothing. And that somehow scares her more. Many people still think that Adaobi's first kill was for revenge, but those who knew her, truly knew her, say it was her first sacrifice to the system she served. So what do you think? Was it loyalty or survival? She doesn't speak of it. Not to Ireti, not to Salako, not even to herself. But something changes in her afterward. The air around her stiffens. People speak to her differently. Even those who outrank her pause before making demands. Word spreads like oil across water. Adaobi handles problems. Her tasks shift again. She's no longer just a courier. She starts coordinating movements, human and otherwise. Girls who need relocating, men who need reminders, boxes that need to disappear before daylight. And the club? It becomes her base. Ireti still reigns, but she begins to fade into the background, intentionally. She lets Adaobi handle more business, more faces, more fire. One day, a man shows up asking for Ireti. He's new, too clean, too confident. Adaobi steps in front of him before he can reach the hallway. "She's not available," she says calmly. He laughs. "And who are you?" She doesn't reply. He tries to push past her. That's a mistake. She shoves him back, just enough to unbalance, then flicks the edge of her knife from beneath her wrap. Just a flash. Less than a second. He leaves. He doesn't come back. The girls in the club notice. They begin calling her Ajanila behind her back, the ground dog, the one who watches silently until she strikes. She doesn't mind the nickname. There's something about being underestimated that makes victory sweeter. And then comes the sugar truck job. It starts as a logistics puzzle. 20 crates of unmarked sugar, really heroin in disguise, need to be moved from Tin Can Port to a storage unit in Mushin. 2 hours, 1 driver, 3 checkpoints, 2 crooked officers already bribed. Simple, too simple. Adaobi doesn't like it. She maps out a second route. Longer, dirtier roads, but fewer eyes. She suggests the switch to Salako. He listens and ignores her. She watches the truck leave anyway, arms crossed. 2 hours later, it doesn't show. 3 hours, 4. By sunset, it's clear. The truck's gone. By midnight, the headlines say, "Bandits." But Adaobi knows better. That route had been sold, maybe by the bribe officers, maybe from inside. Either way, The loss is massive, enough to cripple a week's worth of income. The next morning, she's summoned, not to Sulaco's usual office, but to a warehouse, one that still smells of diesel and fresh paint. He sits in the back, alone. No guards, no chair for her, just a shadow and his voice. "You warned me," he says slowly. She nods. "You were right." Another nod, then silence. Finally, he speaks again. "Next time you plan it fully." She blinks. He's giving her a promotion. Without the title. Without the ceremony. But the weight of it lands squarely on her shoulders. She doesn't say thank you. She says, "Understood." From that point forward, Adaobi takes over nearly all supply coordination between Apapa and Yaba. Her maps multiply. Her contacts deepen. She begins using couriers of her own. Girls like she once was, smart and small, quick and quiet. She teaches them what to wear, how to breathe, when to look invisible, and she pays them fairly. That's what sets her apart. She doesn't exploit. She trains. She protects. And in return, she builds loyalty stronger than any bribe. But loyalty attracts enemies. One night, she returns to the club to find Ireti injured, badly. A swollen lip, blood on her blouse. No one will say who did it. Ireti waves it off. A disagreement. But Adaobi knows. She begins asking questions. Quietly. Not with words, but with favors. Within a week, she has the answer. It was a rival named Kobe, new to town, loud, overconfident, and careless. She asks Sulaco if she can handle it. He raises an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Yes," she says. "Just one word." The plan is simple. She finds Kobe's weak link, a cousin who runs a fish market in Agege. She visits late, smiles, buys 2 tilapia, then leaves a note wrapped in banana leaf. Kobe gets the message. 2 nights later, he's gone. Not killed, just gone. No one sees him again. No body, no police, no noise. That's Adaobi's style now. Not the blade, the silence. And Lagos starts noticing. People begin referring to her as the lady with no shadow, a figure who's always nearby but never fully seen. She starts walking in daylight more, wearing bold fabrics but keeping her face calm. Men try to talk to her. Most fail. One tries to touch her. He leaves with a broken wrist. But the most powerful thing about her isn't fear. It's calm. She doesn't yell. She doesn't warn. She simply acts. And because of that, rumors begin to bloom like wet mold in the alleys. They say she's untouchable. They say she cannot be betrayed. They say if you lie to her, your tongue will swell in your sleep. Lagos loves its myths, and Adaobi, she lets them grow. Because every myth adds another layer of armor. And the woman who once washed onions is now the one controlling the ports. Adaobi's legend starts to take shape, not just in whispers, but in movements. Cart boys begin mimicking her walk, measured, upright, hands behind the back. Barmaids repeat phrases she once used like they were proverbs. Even the street gamblers who once cursed her silence now lower their eyes when she passes. But it's not fear that cements her position. It's predictability. She keeps her word. She pays when she says she will. And if she promises a consequence, it arrives without delay or drama. It's around this time that she begins carrying a knife in her hair. Not tucked behind her waistband anymore. Not hidden under a wrap. In plain sight. A small silver blade disguised as a decorative comb, ornamental to most. But those who know, know. The first person to test her learns the hard way. It's a new supplier from Cotonou. Young, talkative, too eager. He overcharges her on a shipment of French cigarettes. She gives him one chance to correct it. He laughs. At their next meeting, she arrives wearing white. He assumes it's a peace gesture. Midway through negotiation, she removes the knife from her hair in one motion and stabs it into the table between them, right beside his hand. No blood, just silence. He leaves everything on the table. Literally, from that day forward, Adaobi never raises her voice again. She doesn't need to. The knife does the talking. The gesture becomes iconic. Soon, other women begin copying it, wearing combs with steel centers, even if most of them never draw them. But Adaobi's is always real, always sharp. Many people still think that blade was ceremonial, a symbol. But those closest to her insist it was used more than once, and always before sunrise. So what do you think? Was it for image or insurance? Her power deepens. She's no longer just a logistics queen or a shadow behind Salako. She begins building something of her own, a separate network, small, female-led, efficient. She calls them the empty-handed. Their rule: no weapons, no uniforms, no traces. Their job: extraction, not of money, of people, messages, secrets. They move through markets like fish in water, dress like vendors, talk like gossipers. But at a nod from a Daiobi, they deliver entire folders of information from one end of the city to the other without anyone noticing. One of them is a 13-year-old blind girl who can remember entire street maps from footsteps. Another is an aging widow who sells roasted corn by day and plants listening devices by night. A Daiobi trusts them more than she trusts any man, and she pays them in safety, not just money. She makes sure their children are schooled, that their homes are guarded, that if they disappear for a week, no one comes asking, but everyone keeps watch. One evening, Irati asks her, "Why only women?" Adaobi answers plainly, "Because we know how to vanish." There's no sarcasm in her voice, no arrogance, just a fact stated with the weight of someone who has done it too many times, and vanish she sometimes does. There are whole weekends where no one can find her. Even her closest lieutenants admit they don't know where she sleeps. Some say she stays in Makoko, in a floating shack with no electricity. Others say she has a secret room inside the National Theater, disguised behind a storage closet. No one really knows, and that's the point. Then comes a job that defines her rise. The government is about to audit the docks. For real this time, not the usual half-blind glance. There are whispers of foreign inspectors, undercover agents, actual record-keeping. If they find the wrong crate or the right name, it's over. Adaobi gathers her team. They meet in silence, behind a peeling wall poster of Fela Kuti, with only a bare bulb and the sound of rats in the ceiling. She doesn't panic. She draws a plan. Within 48 hours, she relocates 2 entire shipments, replaces 4 port guards, forges new manifests, and arranges for a scheduled accidental power outage during the inspector's arrival. They find nothing. The following week, a high-ranking customs official sends her a basket of pineapples. No note, just fruit. She doesn't eat them, but she keeps the basket. There's something in how Adaobi operates that turns every moment into a lesson. She doesn't rush. She doesn't gloat. She lets her enemies overthink her. One of them, a warehouse manager who tried to double-book a shipment, once described her like this: "She's not fire, she's fog. You don't burn, you drown." And Lagos begins to agree. She's not flashy. She doesn't wear gold. She doesn't drive. But she's everywhere. And when a man goes missing after refusing her deal, no one asks questions. They just look around the next time they pass a woman in a headscarf with eyes that don't blink enough. Adaobi doesn't speak in threats. She speaks in presence. One time, a petty crime boss from Ibadan tries to expand into Lagos. He mocks her name on a radio interview, calling her the fish seller in silk. 3 weeks later, his depot burns down in a freak grease fire. No casualties. But his reputation? Gone. He calls to apologize. She doesn't answer. Another time, a British diplomat's son gets caught in one of her networks, trying to buy heroin dressed like a Peace Corps volunteer. She releases him personally, drives him to the airport in a borrowed taxi. He tells everyone afterward that she never spoke a word during the ride, just hummed a song he couldn't place. He leaves the country 2 weeks later, never comes back, and still dreams about that melody. By now, Adaobi has become more than a figure. She's a symbol, but symbols attract enemies. And soon, one of them steps out of the shadows. Not a rival gang, not the police, but the military, and not just any soldier. A colonel with secrets of his own. The colonel arrives quietly, without fanfare, as most dangerous men do. His name is Colonel Yusuf Adaremi, and in Lagos, names like his tend to echo long after they're gone. A former field commander during the Civil War, Yusuf walks like someone who's already measured every corner of a room. He smells faintly of camphor and kerosene, and he rarely blinks. The first time Adaobi sees him, it's through a crack in the kitchen door of a private lounge deep in Victoria Island. He's speaking with Salako, voices low, but body language unmistakably tense. Salako does most of the talking. Yusuf only nods, his hands folded behind his back like he's commanding troops, not negotiating bribes. Adaobi doesn't introduce herself. Not yet. She watches, catalogs, the way he adjusts his watch twice during the conversation, the way he never sips from the glass placed before him. The man trusts no one, not even the waiter who brought his drink. 3 days later, he sends for her, not via messenger or a phone call. He shows up himself, at the club. Adaobi is seated at her usual table, reviewing a list of coded messages when he walks in. The music dips as the door opens. People look up, recognize the uniform, and start to scatter. Not with panic, but with the practiced nonchalance of people used to proximity with trouble. Colonel Yusuf stops 3 feet from her table and nods. "Miss Adaobi," he says. A moment. She closes the book in front of her. Of course. They walk to a side room, unused during weekdays, kept for poker games and private favors. He waits until the door is shut before speaking. "I hear many things about you," he begins. Most of them unbelievable. Adaobi simply raises an eyebrow. "I'm curious," he continues, "if the girl from EP Port is real, or another Lagos myth." She doesn't confirm or deny, just waits. Finally, he gets to the point. "There are things moving through this city," he says, "and some of them are not yours to move." "Ah, there it is. Control." He wants a piece. Adaobi nods slowly. "And you're here to collect?" "I'm here to suggest cooperation," he replies with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. She nods again, like she's accepting the terms of a business deal, not a veiled threat. "I'll think about it," she says. Yusuf's smile drops. "Think quickly." He leaves without shaking her hand. The room feels colder after he's gone. Ireti, upon hearing the details, sucks her teeth. "The army boys," she mutters. "They don't ask. They circle." Adaobi knows, so she circles back. She spends the next week quietly probing Yusuf's network. Not with confrontation, but with information. She has her empty-handed trail his junior officers, track their routines. She finds out who delivers his groceries, where his son goes to school, what time his driver leaves the compound to buy suya. Nothing is done, nothing is said. But within a week, Yusuf receives an envelope on his office desk. Inside, a photo of him taken at 3:14 a.m., standing barefoot on his balcony. No note. He never mentions cooperation again. Yet strangely, he doesn't retaliate either. Instead, he begins sending her gifts. The first is a leather-bound notebook, empty. The second, a small silver coin from Ghana, dated 1913. The third, a goat, live, delivered to her club, tethered and bleeding. No messages, no demands, just gifts. Adaobi accepts each without question, stores them in a locked cabinet. But her curiosity grows. Why the coin? Why the goat? Why her? She begins asking questions. Quiet ones. Only to people she trusts. Old women who sit near the mosque and know things they're not supposed to. ex-drivers with wounded knees, porters who once served soldiers and know how to fold a bribe so it doesn't crinkle. From them, she learns a sliver of Yusuf's past. He wasn't always army. Once, briefly, he was something else. During the Biafran War, he'd run illicit fuel routes for both sides, switching loyalties based on who paid more. One night, a convoy under his command was ambushed. Only one man survived. They say Yusuf emerged from the wreckage covered in blood, eyes wide, holding the coin that had once belonged to a dead officer. It's just a story, but Adaobi understands the language of stories. She keeps the coin, but the goat? She names it Colonel, then donates it to a school lunch program in Ajagunle. Weeks pass. Yusuf returns, this time without uniform, in plain clothes, just another old man in brown trousers and a pressed shirt. He approaches her booth in the club and doesn't wait for invitation. He sits, orders palm wine, then says, "You handled the sugar job well." Adobe looks at him. "That was months ago." He nods. "I'm a patient man." She doesn't respond. He leans in. "You want to run this city?" "I can make that happen," Adobe says. "I already do." Yusuf laughs, deep and surprising. "You're bold," he says, "but boldness doesn't stop bullets." Adobe looks him in the eye and replies, "Neither does cowardice." They finish the drink in silence. He leaves. She doesn't see him again for a while, but his shadow stays. Military checkpoints become more predictable. Her shipments are waved through with fewer questions. Certain names disappear from her watch list. Others rise. It's not an alliance, it's a truce, and Adobe plays it carefully. She begins hiring men, not to replace her network, but to shield it. Big ones, quiet ones, with histories too messy for day jobs and too loyal to question orders. She trains them herself, not with guns, but with rules. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't flash money. You never touch women. If anyone breaks a rule, they're gone. No warnings. The order spreads quickly. Adaobi's men follow a code. Break it, and you break yourself. Lagos begins to shift again. She starts visiting other neighborhoods. Ikeja, Bariga, even as far as Badagry. Not to expand, to observe. She walks markets with her head wrapped and sandals on. Buys yam. Listens to who complains. Watches how people speak her name without knowing she's standing 10 feet away. They speak with reverence, fear, and sometimes hope. Many people still think Adaobi wanted power for its own sake, but others say she used it like a hammer, to build first, then defend. So, what do you think? Was her empire born from ambition or necessity? One night, at a riverfront shack near 3rd Mainland, she meets with an old fisherman who once knew her father. He was quiet too, the man says, sipping palm spirit. Didn't trust the sea. That's why he drowned. Adaobi doesn't respond, but when she leaves, she takes a stone from his porch, keeps it in her pocket, a reminder that even the cautious can be swallowed. And from that night on, she begins to sleep with one ear open. There's an old saying whispered among the street vendors in Lagos Island. When Mama Osas spits salt, expect a storm. And Mama Osas has just asked to see Adaobi. She's not the kind of woman who sends for people often. If power in Lagos is measured by fear, then Mama Osas is an empire unto herself. She doesn't own clubs or move crates, but she controls the whisper network in the open-air markets, a jungle of gossip, warning, and prophecy. You want to know which officer just got reassigned? She knows. Which marriage is collapsing? She knew before the couple did. And most importantly, who's about to fall? Adaobi doesn't ignore an invitation like that. She arrives before dawn. No entourage, no weapons, no show. She comes wearing a faded wrapper and a scarf over her hair, carrying a bowl of groundnut as a gift. The kind of simple humility that doesn't fool Mama Osas one bit. The old woman is seated under her umbrella stand, fanning herself slowly with a palm frond. Her face is wide, cracked like old clay, and her eyes, those are still sharp, still cutting. "You look tired," she says without looking up. Adobe kneels, only a little. Mama Osas clicks her tongue. The ones who say a little are always the ones carrying too much. She reaches into a rusted tin and pulls out a set of worn cowrie shells. She doesn't ask permission. She just tosses them into the bowl and leans forward. The shells clatter like dry teeth. "You've got 2 deaths hanging over you," Mama Osas says, voice low. One soft, one iron hard. Adobe doesn't flinch. "What do I do?" she asks. "Nothing," the woman says. "They've already been cast." Adobe exhales slowly. "What kind of deaths?" she asks. "One from within," Osas says. "One from the water." And that's all she gives her. No explanation, no map, just riddles in the humid morning air. But Adobe has lived long enough to take riddles seriously. That night, she begins auditing her people. Quietly. She doesn't accuse. She observes. She checks routes, times, shipments. Watches who hesitates before answering her questions. She starts noticing things. A girl named Tomi is suddenly taking more personal calls than usual. One of her veteran couriers, Didi, missed a rendezvous for the first time in 3 years. Too many small cracks. Something's shifting. And the water? That one's harder to pin down. Adobe thinks about the coastlines, the ports, the lagoons, and then she remembers a name, a contact in Bonnie Port, someone who used to help her move rice and electronics. A boatman named Kaleshi, who disappeared months ago without a word. Rumor has it he's working for someone new now, someone foreign. She arranges to meet him. A quiet beach, no witnesses, no guns, just words. Kalechi is older, sunburned, half drunk. He smiles when he sees her, but it's thin, forced. "You've changed," he says. Adaobi doesn't smile. "You disappeared. Things got hot," he replies. "I found a cooler stream." She leans against the broken hull of a boat. "Is that stream moving toward me?" He looks at her for a long time, then shakes his head. "Not yet, but soon." And just like that, she knows. Someone from outside is looking in. Lagos isn't a closed system anymore. Foreign money, foreign ambition, and she's the gate they'll try to push through. Many people still think West Africa's underworld was always internal. Tribes, armies, local dons. But others know better. They know about the French francs in brown envelopes, about the Italian names on fake passports, about the Vietnamese ships that dock without manifest. So what do you think? Was Adeobi facing betrayal from within or invasion from beyond? She doesn't wait to find out. She begins securing her operations like never before. She rotates her team weekly, moves her storage sites, shuts down any route used more than 3 times, and, most importantly, she starts keeping secrets from Salako, not because he's the enemy, but because he's no longer the only player. That same week, a young man named Tunji tries to steal from one of her courier drops. He's caught by a market girl before he can get away. They bring him to her. He's no older than 15, skinny, scared, covered in sweat. Adobe doesn't yell. She offers him water, then asks, "Why?" He says, "They promised to take me to Europe." "Who's they?" He doesn't know, or won't say. Adobe watches him closely. She tells her guards to let him go, but that night she writes his name in her black book. She'll see him again, and when she does, she'll decide then, because now she knows. Someone is recruiting from inside, pulling at the threads, testing her seams, and soon something will tear. Meanwhile, in her private room above the club, she stares at the coin Yusuf gave her, the one from 1913. It's cold in her hand. He knew, she thinks. He knew the storm was coming, not the kind that can be shot or bribed, but the one Mama Osa spoke of, the kind that arrives in silence, with eyes that don't blink, and feet that don't leave prints. She places the coin back into its box, locks it, then whispers to no one, "Let it come." Because Adeobi has lived through ghosts, through betrayal, through fire, and if the next death is already chosen, She plans to choose how it arrives. The colonel returns, not in person this time, but through a whisper. Delivered by a young lieutenant with shoes too shiny to belong in a market. He waits for Adaobi in the shadows of the meat stalls at Oyingbo Market, a military envelope tucked beneath his arm, and sweat blooming beneath his cap. From Colonel Yusuf, he says, offering the package with two hands, like it's an offering to a shrine. Adaobi takes it wordlessly. She waits until the boy is gone, lost in the river of people and flies and smell of raw beef, before slipping the seal open with the corner of her thumbnail. Inside, a single sheet. No greeting, no letterhead, just 6 names. And beneath them, 3 words. Pick a side. Adaobi reads the names once. Then again, 2 of them are hers. One is Salako. The rest, new players, outsiders, all connected in one way or another to the strange funding flooding into Lagos lately. Casinos, textile shipments, shell companies registered in Liberia and Brazil, foreign-sounding names with deep pockets and short memories. Adaobi folds the paper and lights it with a match, watches it burn in a tin cup filled with salt water. Colonel Yusuf isn't just warning her, he's drawing lines in the sand, and the tide is rising. Back at the club, Salako is waiting for her. It's been weeks since they last spoke, and the silence between them crackles now with something sharper than distance. Doubt. He's pacing in her office, tapping his knuckles against the wooden desk like he's trying to drum up courage. When she enters, he stops mid-step. "You saw Yusuf," he says. She says nothing, just pours herself water. "He sent me the same message," Salako adds. "Same names?" She shrugs. "What did you do with yours?" He smiles, but it's crooked. "Filed it under fire." Adaobi looks at him carefully. "Are you still in?" "With you?" he asks. "Always." But his eyes twitch slightly. And Adaobi, who built her empire on reading what isn't said, knows something is off. That night she dreams of Ireti. They're sitting under a mango tree, silent, knees touching. Ireti is older in the dream, with gray at her temples and blood on her lap, like she's already been shot but hasn't noticed yet. "You're standing in a burning house," she says to Adaobi, voice low. "And everyone inside keeps asking if you smell smoke." When Adaobi wakes, her first thought is, who lit the match? She starts digging into the new names, not loudly. She sends the empty-handed. A whisper here, a fake purchase there. They trace property records, listen at betting houses, pose as churchwomen at fundraisers where half the men wear imported watches and none of the women wear sincerity. She finds a pattern. All 6 names intersect at one address. A warehouse near the docks that supposedly ships dried beans. But according to her informants, no beans ever leave. Only crates, tightly sealed, marked with diplomatic codes from an embassy that hasn't existed since 1969. Diplomatic cover, foreign shipments, men in crisp suits speaking broken Yoruba. This isn't about Lagos anymore. This is about using Lagos. Many people still think that West Africa's black markets were simply internal churn, money going in circles. But Adaobi now sees the deeper truth. So, what do you think? Was Lagos being bled from the inside, or from hands halfway across the world? She doesn't bring Salako into this part. Not yet. Instead, she follows a trail that leads her across city lines to a government depot in Badagry. There, under the guise of night and silence, she meets with someone she hasn't seen in years. Cheek, an ex-customs officer turned smuggler turned reluctant ghost. He greets her with a nod, offers her a seat on a rusted fuel drum. "I'm not part of this anymore," he says. She smiles gently. "But you remember how the maps work." He sighs. "What do you want?" "Truth," she replies. Before it becomes extinct, he tells her stories. About fake trade licenses issued in exchange for foreign bribes. About crates arriving marked as educational materials, and leaving full of carved ivory, counterfeit medicine, sometimes worse. And he tells her this: "There's a new shipment coming next Friday, bigger than the others. I don't know what's in it, but it's guarded by people who don't blink." Adaobi thanks him, leaves him with an envelope. When he opens it, it contains no money, just a plane ticket to Ghana. One way. Back in Lagos, she assembles her own list. 6 names of her own, people she trusts, people she might lose. She delivers each one a different gift. A chicken, a new shoe, a bar of soap, a padlock, a single clove of garlic, and a matchbox. Each gift means something only the recipient understands. To outsiders, it's nonsense. To them, it's instruction. A signal. Be ready. Be clean. Be quiet. Be gone if needed. Adaobi is preparing not just for war. She's preparing for thinning, for pruning her world back down to its strongest roots. And then, Salako disappears. Not officially. He's still in Lagos, still calling meetings. But he doesn't show up in person anymore. Sends others. New faces. Men with accents too polished to be from Surulere. Adaobi requests a sit-down. No response. She sends a second request. This time folded inside a bottle of palm oil like they used to do. No response. On the third try, she sends nothing but an old photograph. Her and Salako, years ago, seated outside the club, laughing over fried yam. Still nothing. That silence? That's louder than a threat. And just when she's sure he sold her out, she gets a note, written on a torn napkin. He's not working for them. He is them. No signature, no date, but the handwriting is unmistakable. Ireti. She's still alive, somewhere, and still watching. Adaobi stares at the note for a long time, then burns it. Because the storm Mama Osa spoke of, it's not on the horizon anymore. It's here. And Adaobi? She's standing dead center in the eye. Adaobi stands alone on the club's rooftop just past midnight. The city stretched below her like a tangled net of light and noise. Somewhere far off, a generator coughs into silence. She listens to the rhythm of Lagos at night, the way traffic slows but never truly stops, the way dogs bark like they're answering questions only they can hear. She hasn't seen Salako in 2 weeks, hasn't heard from Ireti in years, until now. The napkin still smells faintly of perfume and groundnut oil. He's not working for them. He is them. Adaobi has always known how to interpret silence. She's built an empire on it. But this message? This is something else. This is the whisper of a match striking in a room full of gas. She exhales through her nose and stares into the street below, watching the headlights of a Danfo draw slow, golden lines across the wet pavement. Her mind maps every possibility. She's been betrayed before, but not like this. In the days that follow, Adaobi does not retaliate. Not yet. Instead, she prepares. She sends couriers to her quiet contacts, the women and men she's placed in odd jobs throughout the city. Janitors in the State Archive building, a washerwoman who works inside the naval barracks, a fried akara vendor who sells just outside the American consulate. Each gets a wordless token, a feather, a strand of green thread, a half-burned match. Each knows what it means. Stay awake, watch everything, report without speaking. Meanwhile, she begins liquidating, not publicly. She sells off 2 of her safe houses through a shell company she registered under the name of a long-dead cousin. She has gold melted into jewelry and redistributed through church auctions. She reroutes supply lines not once, but 3 times, leaving only ghosts behind. Adaobi doesn't run, but she's clearing the board, because when fire comes, it spares nothing flammable, and fire is coming. Late one afternoon, just as the sun begins to stain the lagoon gold, a van pulls up across from the club. It doesn't park. It idles. Inside are 3 men, watching. They don't wear uniforms, but their shoes are military issue. Their silence is trained. One smokes a cigarette and drops the ashes into his own pocket. Adaobi notices from the second-floor window. She says nothing, doesn't alert the staff, just sends one of the empty-handed, Amaka, a tall girl with a birthmark on her cheek and a photographic memory, to follow them when they drive off. She returns 2 hours later, barefoot and grinning. They went to Sulaco's warehouse, she says, but they're not his men. Adaobi nods, doesn't smile, because now she knows this isn't politics anymore. It's cleansing. The next day, a shipment meant for her never arrives. The driver is found in the marsh, throat slit, wallet untouched. Adaobi doesn't panic. She sends a replacement driver the very next morning with an identical route and an empty truck. The trap doesn't spring, but it tightens. That night, Adaobi does something she hasn't done in years. She visits her mother's grave. It's barely marked, just a patch of dirt under a breadfruit tree, wrapped with worn cloth. She kneels, speaks softly, not about business, not about Sulaco, not even about Ireti, just memory. You would laugh at me now, she says. So many knives, so few meals. The wind shifts. A single breadfruit thuds to the ground behind her. She doesn't turn. When she returns to the city, she calls a meeting. Only 6 people are invited. No phones, no names spoken. They meet in the back room of a meat freezer, with the cold seeping into their bones and the smell of salted flesh hanging thick. Adaobi stands before them like a priestess about to deliver last rites. She lays out the facts. Sulaco is compromised, she says. Ireti is alive. The colonel is watching. She tells them the truth. She can't trust anyone completely anymore, but that doesn't mean she's lost. I built this from silence, she says, and I will burn it just as quietly if I have to. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't blink. One of the men, Jide, an old dock worker with scars like tribal lines on his arms, asks the question that's been chewing at all of them. What do we do now? Adaobi doesn't pause. We disappear, and she means it. The next 48 hours are a masterclass in vanishing. The club closes for renovation. Vendors are paid to spread rumors of health violations. The liquor stock is moved under cover of night and donated to a wedding in Ibadan. Every trace of Adaobi's operation dissolves, like sugar in hot water. Her lieutenants scatter, each carrying fragments of her plan, but never the whole. And Adaobi? She walks into the crowd at Balogan Market with nothing but a scarf and a small brown envelope. She passes unnoticed, except by one. A woman selling second-hand shoes glances up, makes the faintest smile. Ireti. No words, just a touch to the chest. And Adaobi knows. They are back on the same side. Later that night, in a flat with no windows and only one lock, Adaobi opens the brown envelope. Inside, photographs, grainy, black and white, surveillance. Sulaco, sitting with men in suits. One wears a pin that doesn't belong to any known government. Another's face is half burned, intentionally, as if someone didn't want it seen. The photos are dated last week, one day after the sugar shipment disappeared, one day before the driver died. Adaobi leans back and exhales. Now she sees the whole board, and she knows what has to happen. Sulaco can no longer be handled. He has to be removed. Many people still think that Adaobi never killed anyone important herself, that she always sent others. But some whisper about a single exception. One night, one betrayal, one final act that changed everything. So what do you think? Will she do it herself, or will she become the kind of ghost even she used to fear? She closes the envelope, pulls her knife from her hair, stares at the edge. It gleams softly in the candlelight. No blood yet, but it's waiting, and so is she. The morning Sulaco disappears, the city doesn't notice. No sirens, no screams, no bullet holes in bar walls. Just silence, like someone unplugged the chaos for a moment. But the people who know, really know, feel it, like pressure dropping before a storm. 1 minute, he's meant to be at a meeting with a customs liaison in Apapa. The next, his car is found abandoned beneath 3rd Mainland Bridge, door ajar, keys in the ignition, seat still warm. No blood, no note, just a single pack of cigarettes on the dashboard, still sealed. Adaobi, from her safe flat, hears about it within 11 minutes. She's seated on a worn rug, oil lamp burning low, grinding dried cloves into a steel bowl. She listens as Amaka delivers the news without emotion, like someone reporting the weather. Gone? Adobe asks. Amaka nods. Gone. Adeobi doesn't ask who took him. She already knows. But what she doesn't know, what keeps her sitting perfectly still for the next 5 minutes, is whether she feels relief or regret. Later that day, she receives a package. No return address. Wrapped in brown paper, folded with military precision. Inside, a bundle of cash, foreign bills, unmarked, crisp, and underneath, a single matchstick. Not burned, not broken, just waiting. She smiles faintly. The colonel's answer then. A deal has been struck, somewhere far above her head, and someone has been paid. Perhaps it was Sulaco's final favor. Perhaps it was someone else's move entirely. Either way, Sulaco is off the board. And Adobe? Still standing, still silent, still watched. Now she has a different problem. The money. Her empire still flows. Quietly. But with Sulaco gone, everyone starts asking questions they were too afraid to voice before. Vendors demand confirmation that their cut is still protected. Police officers want to know who they're bribing now. Rivals sniff around old drop points, looking for signs of weakness. And her own people? Some start looking over their shoulders, at her, as though she's a candle that's just flickered in the wind. That's when she makes the boldest move of her career. She disappears. Not for hours, for days. No contact, no sightings, no pattern. She lets the city stew. Let them worry. Let them imagine she's dead, fled, captured, and just when the silence starts turning into rumor, she returns. It's a Tuesday. Hot, muggy, the kind of day Lagos sweats through in slow motion. And Adeobi walks into the heart of Belogan Market like she owns the sky. She wears a white wrapper, clean, ironed. Her headscarf is tied high. Her eyes, hidden behind sunglasses no one has ever seen her wear before. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. She walks from stall to stall, greeting no one, but watching everyone. Men stop chewing. Women pause in mid-bargain. Someone drops a basket of plantains. By the time she reaches the tailor's row, half the market is following her with their eyes. And then she does something even more powerful than returning. She buys. Nothing big, just a hand-stitched blouse, 3 yards of navy blue lace, a spool of black thread. She pays in exact cash. No bargaining. Then she turns, walks away. That night, stories spread like wildfire. She's back. She looks different. She didn't blink. And in Lagos, that's how you keep power. Not by fighting. By walking like you've never lost. Still, the infrastructure needs repairing. Adeobi calls a meeting. Only 3 people are invited. Amaka, Didi, and an old man named Papa Ayo. Once a smuggler, now a tailor with a secret tunnel beneath his workshop. They meet under the guise of measuring fabric. Inside a shuttered fashion stall, surrounded by folded ankara and fake zippers, Adeobi lays out her plan. Not to expand, not to replace Sulaco, but to rebuild. Not bigger, she says. Smarter, quieter, thinner. They don't nod. They simply listen, because her voice has returned. Calm, commanding, more powerful perhaps than before. Step 1, relocate. Every current safe house is burned, not literally, but mentally. Never used again. She sets up 3 new sites, each operated by people who don't know each other. No names are spoken out loud. Everything is code. Colors, fabrics, smells. The woman who handles shipment logs is called Mint. The boy who runs messages between warehouses is Starch. And the new secure drop point? A mosque bathroom with a loose tile beneath the leftmost urinal. Adeobi doesn't reinvent the wheel. She refines it. Then comes the issue of money. Without Sulaco, the international link is broken, but only publicly, because Adeobi, like all great survivors, had prepared long ago. Years before, during a visit to a tailor in Ghana, she established a relationship with a shipping agent named Matilda. Soft-spoken, extremely polite, and completely ruthless, Adeobi reaches out. No phone, no text, just a white handkerchief mailed inside a children's storybook. Matilda replies with a photograph of a goat, one eye closed. The deal is back on. New routes, fewer people, higher fees. Adeobi doesn't blink. She pays. Weeks pass. The operation tightens, slims, begins to hum again, but quieter this time, like a cat walking on silk. And Adaobi? She becomes less visible, but more present. People feel her in the way arguments go silent when her name is mentioned, in the way rival bosses delay meetings for fear she might show up, in the way the club, though officially closed, always has one light on upstairs. She becomes once again fog. And one night, a man, drunk, bold, foolish, tells a story in a roadside bar about how Adaobi is finished, that she's just a shadow now. No one even knows where she sleeps. The bartender, a woman with cracked lips and quiet eyes, serves him his last drink, smiles, and walks outside. She doesn't return. The man doesn't make it home. Many people still think that Adaobi disappeared after Salako vanished, but those paying attention, they know she didn't disappear. She distilled into something sharper, something harder to kill, something that waits. And on one very still evening, she stands at the edge of EP Port again, staring out at the same water that took her father. She lets the breeze carry her silence, and finally says out loud, "I'm still here." The sea says nothing back, but it listens, because even water knows some ghosts don't fade. They grow stronger in the dark. Lagos is never truly quiet, but tonight, it's as close as it gets. The rain hasn't started, but the clouds hang low like they're waiting for permission. The kind of weather that makes secrets easier to keep, because everyone walks faster and no one looks up. Adaobi is in the heart of the market again. This time, not to be seen. She moves like a rumor, half visible, wrapped in fabric too plain for memory. Her feet barely lift as she walks, and yet she makes no sound. Her destination isn't the club. It isn't a warehouse or a church or any of her usual corners. It's a market stall, just one, selling threadbare books, old calendars, and broken cassette tapes. No one ever buys anything here, which is exactly the point. The man behind the stall is thin, sunburned, and missing 2 fingers. He doesn't look up when she stops. He just says, "Which year you want?" Adaobi replies, 1976. He nods once, reaches under the table, and hands her a calendar from 1981. Folded inside it, a note, no names, no threats, just coordinates and a time. 3 hours later, she's crouched behind a stack of disused fishing nets in a dockyard no longer marked on official records. The air smells of salt and diesel. A single bulb hangs above the door of a prefab office trailer, and inside that trailer, she doesn't know yet, but she's about to find out. The meeting has been arranged by a man no one's ever seen twice, a fixer, a middleman's middleman, someone who operates in margins so thin, even silence feels like too much noise. Adaobi knocks once, then again softer. The door creaks open. Inside, 4 people. 2 she recognizes, 1 she expected, and 1 she didn't. The expected one? Matilda. Calm, crisp, still dressed like a librarian on holiday. The 2 she recognizes, import managers from Togo and Côte d'Ivoire, names she'd heard whispered in shipping manifests and black market weddings. And the 4th, a woman, tall, unfamiliar, wearing a gray suit that doesn't wrinkle, and a face that doesn't blink. Adaobi narrows her eyes. No introductions are made. Matilda gestures to a chair. Adaobi takes it, folding herself into the dim room like she belongs there. The woman in the gray suit speaks first. "You've been recommended." Adaobi doesn't answer. "Your city," the woman continues, "is inefficient, full of noise." Adaobi says nothing. "We want clarity, precision, discretion." Finally, Adaobi leans forward. "You want my roots." The woman doesn't flinch. "We want your silence." A beat. Adaobi taps her finger once on the table. "Then stop speaking in riddles." A moment of tension sharp enough to slice bread. Then Matilda chuckles. She's still sharp. The woman in gray sighs. "There's a ship coming in 10 days, unregistered. Cargo is sensitive." "How sensitive?" Adaobi asks. The woman replies, "Do you care?" Adaobi smiles without warmth. "I care when silence gets expensive." The room shifts. Deals aren't made in this moment, not officially, but something unspoken clicks into place. Later, as Adaobi walks back through the dockyard, she doesn't feel fear. She feels purpose, because now she knows. She's no longer playing just in Lagos. She's sitting at a table bigger than any she's known, and she's bringing her own knives. Back in the city, things start to move. She receives an anonymous crate of audio cassettes, all blank except one. She plays it on an old stereo. The tape whirs, and a voice comes through. Deep, foreign, male. It simply says, "You will ensure the container is untouched. If it is opened, there will be no second shipment and no second city." Adobe presses pause, removes the tape, burns it. She understands. She's no longer a courier. She is a buffer, a seal, a firewall. Many people still think that Adobe's empire was built on fear, but the truth is subtler. She built it on silence, on knowing when not to ask. So what do you think? Can someone stay clean by guarding what must never be opened? The next few days, she prepares. Her team doesn't know what's coming, only that something big is moving through. She doesn't tell them the container's origin. She doesn't tell them the value. She tells them only one thing. Don't look inside. She posts 2 guards, old loyal. She pays them triple. She feeds them herself. Because trust at this level isn't just loyalty, it's insurance. The night before the ship arrives, Adaobi visits the market, not to gather intel, but to listen to the rhythms of normalcy. The laugh of a boy chasing a chicken, the hiss of onions dropped into hot oil, the distant sound of a preacher promising miracles on credit. Lagos in all its cracked brilliance. She buys a roasted corn, sits on a plastic stool, watches the sky, and lets herself wonder, what's in that container? She knows she'll never know. She also knows that part of her wants to. But she remembers Mama Osas's warning. One death is soft, the other is iron hard, and she wonders, which one would curiosity bring? The ship arrives at 2:47 a.m. It doesn't sound its horn, doesn't wait at the usual berth. It drifts into the harbor like a ghost returning to its grave. Silent, deliberate, and somehow expectant. Adobe watches from a distance, seated in the cab of an old bakery truck, her eyes fixed on the shadows moving along the dock. The container is offloaded with unusual speed. No customs officer checks the manifest. No port supervisor signs paperwork. The cranes move with pre-planned precision. This isn't a delivery, it's a handover. The container is midnight blue, unmarked, and cleaner than everything around it. A shine that doesn't belong in Lagos. Like it never touched real dirt. Like it was made somewhere with cleaner air. The guards at Aobi posted, Ayo and Bisola, stand a respectful 10 meters back. Neither speak. They've been briefed. They know this isn't the kind of shipment you guard with bullets. This is the kind you guard with silence. At 3:12 a.m., Adaobi approaches the container for the first time. She doesn't touch it, doesn't even get close, just observes. There's a chill to the air now, strange for Lagos. She smells rust and something else, something colder than metal. A scent with no name. Then a truck arrives. Matilda steps out first. She's wearing gloves, though there's no dust. The driver, a man with no eyebrows and a crooked tooth, stays in the cab. He never once looks in the direction of the container. Matilda walks to Adaobi. "No changes?" she asks. Adaobi shakes her head. No noise, no eyes. Matilda hands her a black envelope. Heavy. "You're half, in advance." Adaobi tucks it into her coat. Doesn't check, doesn't need to. The trust between them was purchased years ago with something far more valuable than money. Then Matilda walks to the container. She taps twice on the side. It hisses open, not loudly, not like steel resisting, more like breath being held and then released. Inside, Adobe doesn't look. She turns away deliberately. She hears no movement, no shifting of cargo, no sound of unloading, just silence. Matilda returns 10 minutes later. It's done. Adaobi nods. No one speaks of what was inside. By sunrise, the container is gone. So is the truck. So are the guards. Adaobi sits in the truck's cab, hands still, and she knows something has changed. Not just in her operation. In the city, it's subtle, but real. Later that week, Lagos police receive a spike in unexplainable incidents. A judge resigns without warning and disappears to Ghana. A consulate employee is found floating in the lagoon. No bruises, no signs of trauma. Eyes wide open. 3 military checkpoints are relocated overnight. The official explanation? Traffic optimization. But Adaobi knows better. The wind has changed. She meets Matilda again at an abandoned filling station just outside Surulere. This time, the air smells like roasted peanuts and engine oil. Matilda hands her another envelope. Adaobi opens this one. Inside, a list of names, all foreign, all new, all connected. And next to each one, a single check mark or a cross. Adaobi studies them carefully. What happens to the ones with crosses? She asks. Matilda shrugs. What happens to forgotten files? Adaobi folds the paper and pockets it, then asks, Why me? Matilda looks at her like that's the wrong question. You're quiet, she says. You're thorough, you know how to vanish. Adaobi doesn't respond. She's thinking of Mama Osis's second warning. One death from water. She wonders if this is what it meant. This creeping influence. This network that moves like mold. Quiet, spreading, impossible to pin. She walks back to her truck, but just before climbing in, she turns. You're using Lagos, she says, evenly. Do you plan to leave anything behind when you're done? Matilda pauses, then replies softly, No one ever does. And that's when Adaobi knows. This isn't about cargo. It never was. This is about footprints, leaving them, erasing them, or being buried under someone else's. Adaobi begins redrawing her own maps, not of streets, of people. She starts cataloging every contact she's made in the last 10 years. Who is vulnerable? Who talks too much? Who can disappear? She begins building a second ledger. This one encrypted, stored in 3 different locations, just in case. She doesn't know what's coming next, but she knows this. She will not be caught unprepared. Then the gambler arrives. He walks into the club like it never closed. Gold tooth, smooth accent. A wristwatch worth more than most cars. He orders palm wine, plays 1 game of cards with 2 strangers, and wins. Then turns to Adaobi and says, You're holding something very fragile. She raises an eyebrow. He smiles. And I don't mean the wine. Over the next hour, they talk. Not in threats, in metaphors. He says, Every city is a deck. She says, And every king gets pulled eventually. He says, You're trying to hold a river in your hands. She says, Not trying, just not drowning. He laughs, but his eyes, sharp. Later, as he leaves, he hands her a card. Not a business card, a playing card. Queen of Spades, burned slightly at the edge. That night, Adaobi places the card beside her mirror, watches it reflect beside her face. She doesn't know what it means yet, but she knows enough to recognize the feeling creeping in. She's being watched. Again. Only this time, it's not from above, it's from below. The cracks are starting to show. The sea beneath the city is rising, and no one, not even Adaobi, knows what's about to surface. The Niger River is slow this time of year. Thick, wide, dark as tea. It moves like time does in dreams. Unhurried, but impossible to stop. And Adaobi is standing on its bank barefoot, not alone, not entirely safe. She's here for a ritual. One she doesn't entirely believe in, but knows better than to ignore. The woman leading it is older than time, or at least seems to be. Her skin folds in careful layers around her eyes, and her fingers are stained from herbs Adaobi doesn't recognize. She wears a necklace of snail shells in silence. This isn't a show for tourists. This is real. The kind of real that doesn't need permission to work. Adaobi kneels when told. Doesn't ask why. The woman dips a calabash into the river, mumbles a prayer in a language older than Lagos, and pours a stream of water across Adaobi's hands. Then she speaks. You walk without shadow. Adaobi says nothing. You carry things that do not want to be carried. Still nothing. Something rides behind your eyes. That one hits. Adaobi's breath catches. Just for a moment. The old woman leans close, her breath like dried leaves. People think you're made of steel. She places a wet thumb between Adaobi's brows. You are not. Adaobi closes her eyes, not in fear, in acceptance. When the ritual ends, Adaobi leaves behind 2 coins, a braid of her own hair, and a strip of cloth from the white wrapper she wore during her market return. Payment, sacrifice, signature. The river will remember, so will she. The story of the river ritual spreads, not because she tells it, she never would, but because one of the empty-handed sees her barefoot, with wet sleeves, walking back into the city before sunrise. And that's enough. They whisper, she's changed. She went to the water. She left something behind. In Lagos, change is louder than thunder, even if it doesn't speak. The nickname starts that same week. Adaobi and the river spirit. No one knows who says it first, but it sticks. Vendors start leaving small calabashes outside their stalls when they hear she might visit. A police officer offers her a coconut and won't take money for it. One of her drivers refuses to accept gas money, claiming, "The spirit already filled my tank." Adaobi doesn't encourage it, but she doesn't deny it either, because myths are insulation. And right now, she needs every layer of protection she can get. Meanwhile, the outside forces grow bolder. A second unmarked shipment arrives. No warning this time. No Matilda. No note. Just a crate that accidentally lands in one of her containers. Adaobi doesn't touch it. She doesn't even get close. She calls in a favor from a dock worker whose son she once sent to school. He peeks, comes back pale, says, "Whatever is inside, it's not meant to stay here." Adaobi nods, has the crate sealed again, and thrown in the sea, weighted down, gone by morning. She knows there will be consequences, but they're easier to face than curiosity. The next day, the Queen of Spades card goes missing. No break-in, no mess, just gone. Adaobi stares at the empty spot beside her mirror for a long time, then pulls the mirror off the wall. Behind it, nothing, or maybe everything. She replaces it anyway, and that night, places a new card beside it. Ace of clubs, message received, her move. She calls a meeting of the empty-handed, all 23. They gather at an abandoned maternity clinic on the mainland. She makes them sit in a circle. No titles, no ranks. She stands barefoot in the center. Not for drama, for grounding. She tells them, things are shifting. The city is being borrowed. They nod. They already know. She continues, I want no one inside who needs to be protected. That hits. 2 women leave quietly. No shame, no resentment, just realism. Adaobi bows as they go, then looks at the others. If you stay, she says, you stay knowing this might end loud. The silence after is stronger than agreement. Then she gives each of them a seed, literal, from the calabash. You'll know when to plant it, she says. None ask why. None refuse. Because Adaobi doesn't give gifts, she gives warnings that grow. 2 nights later, someone throws a Molotov cocktail into a known storage site. No casualties. The building was already empty. Adaobi had cleared it days before. She's ahead now, but just barely. Then just as suddenly, Ireti returns. She walks into the club. Yes, the club, recently reopened, dressed in black, with a silver ring on her middle finger and a small pistol visible at her hip. The music cuts out. Even the generator hum seems to hesitate. She sits at Adaobi's old table, facing the door. No fear, no fuss. When Adaobi arrives, they don't speak for several minutes. Just sit. Then, Ireti breaks the silence. You're not done, she says, but you're close. Adaobi nods. I was watching, Ireti adds. You've made it heavy. I had to, Adaobi replies. Ireti leans in. Then you'll need to know how to carry it. That night, they speak in code, in memory, in pieces of a language only they ever fully spoke. Adaobi learns things. Names, faces, movements. Ireti has been watching the foreign push from her own shadows. Networks even Adaobi never fully traced. They're deeper than she feared, and growing, and they have another name for her now. Asset 19, she doesn't know what happened to the other 18, but she plans to find out because someone somewhere has started counting her. And Adaobi? She does not like to be counted. Adaobi never liked being labeled. Even as a child, people tried to call her quiet, sharp, strange. But the names never stuck because she didn't let them. Now, someone has tried to label her again. Asset 19, a cold title, something from a ledger, something to be filed, monitored, and, when no longer useful, deleted. She doesn't know who coined it. but she knows what it means. They see her as a tool, a function, that, more than any foreign shipment, stirs her rage. Not a loud rage, not the kind that throws bottles or flips tables, but the deeper kind, the kind that rewires you. She spends the next 4 days doing what she does best, watching. Her network is quiet, humming beneath the noise of the city. The empty-handed move through Lagos like dancers no one remembers hiring. They map routes, track faces, listen in churches, clinics, brothels, and Adaobi listens through them. Patterns emerge. Phone calls from untraceable numbers. An uptick in power outages near port neighborhoods. High-ranking officers attending meetings at hotels that don't show up on city maps. And then a name, Colonel Joseph. No relation to Yusuf. Different beast entirely. Trained in Europe. Talks like a diplomat. Walks like a mercenary. Rumor has it, he's the one overseeing the asset files. Adaobi has never met him, but she knows she will. She begins to bait the trap, a series of quiet moves. She allows one low-level informant to overhear a fake shipment plan. She has a fake crate staged, full of rocks and sugar and one very old Bible. She lets it slip that she'll be overseeing the handoff herself. The crate is moved, the meeting is arranged, and Adaobi is not there. Instead, she watches from a building 3 stories up, sipping warm tea through a plastic straw. At precisely 3:22 p.m., a black SUV arrives. 4 men step out. 2 carry briefcases. 1 carries nothing. And the last, that's him, Colonel Joseph. You can always tell the leader by who opens the door for whom. He inspects the crate himself, opens it, finds nothing. Just sugar and scripture. He doesn't react, just nods to his men. They say something into radios, and just like that, Adaobi knows 2 things. He's careful. He's not angry yet, which means she still has time, but not much. That night, she meets with Iridi again. They sit by the lagoon, where the water laps against rusted boats and children throw stones without reason. Adaobi speaks first. They've started categorizing us. Iridi doesn't look surprised. They always do. When they can't control you, they classify you. Adaobi nods. There's a colonel. I know. Of course she does. What would you do? Adaobi asks. Iridi picks up a stone, holds it. I'd remind him I'm not a file. She throws the stone. It skips once, then sinks. Adaobi watches the ripples disappear. The next day, Adaobi disappears again. This time it's not tactical. It's emotional. She walks the city like it's her first time. Eats Iwa Agoyan from a roadside stall. Buys matches from a child who doesn't know who she is. Rides a Danfo just to feel it lurch over potholes. She needs to remember what she's fighting for, because when you're only seen as a number, Asset 19, it's easy to forget you were once a person, a girl with dirty feet and bigger fears. That night, she returns to the club, but she doesn't go upstairs. She sits downstairs with the regular people, orders palm wine, listens to the music, watches the people she protects without them knowing, and she feels it again. That thin thread pulling her back to herself, not the ghost, not the boss, not the asset, just Adaobi. But peace is a visitor, not a tenant. At 2:13 a.m., she gets the call. Amaka, breathless. They're raiding the pier. Not police, not army, something else. They're burning files. Adaobi doesn't panic. She pulls on her scarf and heads into the smoke. By the time she arrives, the sky is already orange. Flames rise from the smallest building, the records shack. A calculated burn, not an accident. And across the street, a man in gray, sunglasses, smiling. He sees her and tips an invisible hat, then climbs into a waiting car. Gone before she reaches him. She doesn't chase. She already knows what he's left behind. A message, louder than gunfire. We see you, and we don't need your files, because we already made our own. That night, Adaobi sits alone, looks through her ledgers, burns half of them, reroutes the rest, and writes one final line in a fresh notebook. They think I'm one of theirs, but I never was. Many people still think Adaobi folded under pressure. that she gave in, gave up, vanished. But others know better. So what do you think? When the system labels you and tries to fold you in, is survival becoming one of them? Or staying something they can't name? Adobe chooses the latter, and in silence prepares her next move, because the game has changed. But she hasn't. Adobe does not retaliate, not right away. She waits, because the kind of storm she's preparing doesn't begin with thunder. It begins with clouds. And right now, Lagos is overcast. The raid on the pier was not just an act of aggression, it was a test. They burned the smallest building, spared the others, left no bodies, only a message. We can reach you, but we haven't yet. Adobe reads that message the way some read scripture. Slowly, carefully, with all the weight between the lines. She knows the next strike won't come as a warning, so she stops waiting and begins the reset. First, she reorganizes her structure. The empty-handed are no longer foot soldiers. They're archivists, librarians of whispers. She splits them into pairs, sends them into different cities. Ibadan, Aba, Port Harcourt. They're to live as ghosts, sleep lightly, ask no questions unless asked. Each one carries a single item wrapped in red cloth, a name, a route, a key. No one knows what's in whose bundle. Not even her. It's not about control anymore. It's about continuity. If Adobe disappears, the work doesn't. The silence remains. Then she visits Mama Osa's. Again, the market is hotter this time. Fewer umbrellas, more flies. Mama Osas is sitting under a cracked parasol, sipping something purple from a reused gin bottle. Adobe kneels as always. She doesn't speak, but Osas does. Both deaths are still circling. She says, "You haven't earned either yet." Adobe nods. "But I'm closer?" The old woman shrugs. One walks, one swims. It depends on where you choose to stand. Adobe looks at the ground. Dusty, cracked, no water in sight. She smiles faintly. "Then I'll stay here, just a little longer." And then, a new rumor. Someone's talking. Not her people, not her enemies. A third voice. One that knows things only a ghost should know. The rumor spreads through betting houses and bus stops. The lady with no shadow, they say, once made a deal with foreign men. They say she took something from a container and kept it. They say she's compromised. Adobe hears this from a fruit vendor who doesn't even know he's talking to her. She listens, pays, walks away, and she understands. The final game has begun. That night, she returns to the club. It's quieter now. Her staff lean into their routines like people afraid to exhale. She walks upstairs, sits in her chair, lights a single candle, and writes one letter, just one. She addresses it to no one, signs it with her first name only, folds it into a strip of fabric from her first wrapper, then gives it to Didi. "If something happens," she says, "take this to the old ferry terminal in Lekki." Didi nods, asks no questions. That's why she was chosen. The next week is still, too still. No new shipments, no messages, no sightings of Colonel Joseph, and yet something is moving. She can feel it, like a knife inside her boot, like footsteps outside a door she hasn't opened yet. She dreams of waves, of rising tides, of voices underwater. She wakes gasping, the first time in years. Then, one morning, her second betrayal arrives, not from an outsider, from Amaka, her best, the girl with the birthmark, the one she trusted with roots and names and stories. Adobe doesn't believe it at first, but the evidence is too clean, too intentional. Amaka left a route unprotected, let a truck pass through unchecked. Cargo, unknown. Destination, unknown. Consequence, massive. Within days, 3 vendors are arrested. 2 of Adobe's fake passports are flagged, and a whisper, clear, unmistakable, says, "She's slipping." Adobe finds Amaka herself, not with fury, not with tears, just presence. They meet in a cemetery near a grave with no name. Amaka stands under a tree, hands shaking. She doesn't beg, she doesn't deny. She just says, "I thought I could outplay them." Adobe stares for a long time, then walks forward, takes Amaka's hand, and places something inside it, a seed. from the calabash. No words, she leaves her there. And Amaka? She plants the seed. A week later, the tree begins to grow. A month later, Amaka is never seen again. Many people still think that Adaobi punished betrayal with blood. But those who watched carefully, they know her punishments were quieter, lonelier. She didn't take your life, she took your place, and left you to figure out what to do with the silence. That same month, something unusual happens. One of the containers in Lagos port is flagged by an international agency, a real one, not local, not corrupt. And suddenly, all the foreign players vanish. Just like that, Matilda disappears. Colonel Joseph stops answering phones. The Queen of Spades is found torn in half, floating down a gutter. Adaobi walks through the city, watching the spaces left behind, and she knows the foreign interest has moved on, like a storm that didn't break, just passed through, ruining the air, then leaving before the sky split. And now she's left with a city that looks the same, but isn't. It's quieter, emptier, more cautious, and so is she. Adaobi sits in her club late at night, lights low, music soft. She's alone now, more than ever, but alive, still here. She touches the seed in her pocket, the last one, the one she never gave away, then stands, walks out, and buries it beneath the breadfruit tree near her mother's grave. The soil is soft. The moon is watching. The air is still. This is not the end, but it's close. So, here we are, quiet now. The night has done what it always does. It took a story and carried it, like a tide, across the distance between us. Adaobi's journey, whether you see it as tragic, heroic, or simply inevitable, has been one of shadows, of sharp glances and slow movements, of loyalty earned, lost, and remembered. She was never the loudest, never the bloodiest. But perhaps she was always the most prepared, because in Lagos, sometimes survival doesn't belong to the strongest. It belongs to the one who disappears just before the knife comes down, the one who walks through fire and still smells of salt and rain. Maybe you understand her. Maybe you don't. Maybe you saw yourself in the way she moved or in the way she said nothing at all. And maybe, tonight, that silence gave you something. A little comfort, a little perspective, or maybe just enough weight to let your thoughts settle and your breath slow. The streets of Lagos are quiet now. The ghosts are resting, and the river spirit sleeps with one eye open. So if your eyes are still open, let them close now. You've walked far enough with her tonight. She'll take it from here. Thanks for listening. Sleep well. And wherever you are, know this. Some stories were never meant to be shouted, only whispered.